Heavy discussion was obviously triggered by my takedown of TikToker Huey Lee, who tells everyone he's got a PhD in poli-sci, but can't seem to define communism or capitalism for that matter, which is cool because it's the only political economy we've been living in for the past 400 years. The fact that Huey Lee spends an entire video complaining about either A, me being white, or B, his personal anecdotal childhood stories about schools in China, and never not once approaching a substantial critique of either communism or socialism or the policies therein, is never addressed by Heavy Discussion. Heavy Discussion spends 2 entire posts ranting about culture war stuff that would make his ruling class overlords proud. Once again, much like Huey Lee, Heavy Discussion spends 0 time debunking or critiquing the socio-economic policies of socialist governments or the ideas of communism, and hyper-focuses instead on the fact that these ideas of communism are being repeated by me, a white person. The only glimpse of a hint of a point that I could find in Heavy Discussion's post was referring to when Huey Lee said Karl Marx never defined what communism was clearly. And I said that's not true. In page 15 of the Communist Manifesto, he said it was abolishing private property. Pretty clearly he stated right there. And Heavy Discussion's retort to this was, so which white people that follow him are going to be the first to give up privileges and trust funds and plan on returning their land and assets? This is a complete straw man of communism. Heavy Discussion does not understand the difference between personal property and private property. Not to mention, he literally unironically does the meme. Capitalism is when iPhone, because everybody knows that you can't be anti-capitalist and have an Amazon account. Everyone knows you can't critique capitalism and participate in society. Everyone knows it's the consumer's fault and not how society organizes around the prevailing mode of production, distribution, and exchange. As you were. Thank you, Jeff Bezos. Instead, the discussion is about me having shaggy hair and looking like Zach Galifianakis with a mediocre white take. After all, I'm a white TikToker. Notice that my take is not mediocre based on the merit of the discussion. It's mediocre because I'm white. It has nothing to do with the ideas that I've talked about. Heavy Discussion, whoever you are, that's nice revisionism. But unfortunately, it's not anything to do with what the conversation was about. Again, I remind you, it is about the ideas of communism and socialism. And if you want to critique them, then you can talk about that. You can talk about the socioeconomic policies of Maoist China if you would like. But nowhere do I see this. I see a bitter rant about me being white. I get it, you know? White people are fucking awful. I understand that. I ask my audience, is this good class-conscious content? I'm white, and I'm poor, and I'm trending, so I must be a MAGA communist right-wing libertarian. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Richard Nixon would approve this message because if Richard Nixon was good at anything, it was dividing the working class along cultural issues. It is always the hallmark of bad faith actors in political discussions to discredit the person along personal characteristics and personal traits rather than the ideas being presented. Neither Heavy Discussion nor Huey Lee engaged with the ideas being presented. Nowhere in my takedown of Huey Lee do I debunk him for being non-white or being Chinese. I debunk him on the strength of his arguments. What's even more ironic is that Heavy Discussion tries to say that I'm a right-wing libertarian for simply disagreeing with Huey Lee, when perhaps there's nothing more right-wing libertarian than being anti-China. What's even more absurd than that is that I am a white bootlicking regime apologist who should go live in Hong Kong, China, or Taiwan simply for calling attention to the fact that Huey Lee's arguments were weak. I'm reminded of how people attack who they can. People attack people by proxy. Heavy Discussion and Huey Lee can't fight the ruling class, or they don't know how. They can't, call out Larry Fink in a post and get him to read it. But they can call out a white TikToker and get them to read it and see it and engage with it. So we attack people by proxy. This is another form of punching to the left or to the right and not focusing on the actual enemies in class war. Huey Lee and Heavy Discussion are both mad at capitalism. They're mad at capitalists. They're not mad at other working class people. Other working class people don't affect their daily lives the way that capitalists do. Only ruling class people can do that. But ruling class people are very well insulated from society. They don't have to talk to us. So it's much better for them to get us to fight each other about cultural issues. According to Heavy Discussion, I'm a white moderate supremacist, debunking non-white peoples for their lived experiences. Again, this is another deflection. I'm talking about the ideas of communism and socialism. It is well understood that when you come to a political discussion, you do not bring personal anecdotal stories. If I want to talk about Trump's economic policies and how they had real material effects and consequences on American people, I don't talk about the time that he was a host on a reality TV show and he said this thing. That is not relevant. Heavy Discussion goes on to say that most people recognize open gaslighting against non-white people, but when it comes to a Chinese person critiquing Mao Xi regime, specifically in the US, they don't recognize that. But again, this is moving the goalposts. This is revising the actual content of Huey Lee's video. Let's take a look at what his critique of Mao's regime was.
They wrote a poem telling Khrushchev to quit farting. I'm serious. I don't know why he thought it was a good idea to put the word fart in a poem.
Right, Mao said fart in a poem, therefore communism bad. And my response was what?
Mao said the word fart in a poem? Well, that's it. Communism is done. Stick a fork in it. No more trying to uplift the proletariat or raise the standard of living for peasants. Let's go back to the czar. We can't empower the working class because Mao said fart in a poem.
Simple fact is that I welcome a critique of Mao and Xi and their regimes. But that's not what happened. Don't try to fool your audience. Pretend like you just gave some substantial critique of socioeconomic policies in socialist governments in the 20th century. That's not what happened. I will restate my position. The traditions of socialism and communism are specifically pro-working class. They are pro-working class ideas, principles, and values. And we should uphold them, and we should promote them in current society, which is dominated by global imperial capitalism. Most people, whether they are white like me, or black, or Chinese, or transgender, are in the working class. And it is a class war that we are in. And the ruling class loves for us to be divided along cultural issues that have nothing to do with our material conditions. That is not to say that being born white doesn't confer an enormous advantage in this life as opposed to being born a minority. But if I am talking about the principles of communism and someone comes along and says communism bad because Mao said fart in a poem, or because you had to sing a song about communism as a kid and you hated it, sorry, I'm gonna call that person out. And it doesn't matter if that person is Chinese or lived in China, it is a weak argument to make and that person should do better. Again, I will restate my position that focusing on cultural issues or making ad hominem attacks to discredit the ideas of pro-working class traditions, or even socialist states and governments which challenge the cultural hegemony of Western imperial capitalism, is not class conscious, it is reactionary, and it does not help the working class or the labor movement. I would invite both Heavy Discussion and Huey Lee, as I had asked him before, to actually make a video or make a post that is talking about the ideas of communism and socialism, or the socialist governments of Mao or Xi or whoever, why they are wrong, why they are bad, if they are bad. If you feel that way, then make a post about that.